In the charged atmosphere of Capitol Room 2141, Jim Jordan was inexorably determined to dismantle Jasmine Crockett's authority over the course of a bracing 5-hour inquiry. Equipped with carefully edited video clips and a barrage of accusatory questions, he sought aggressively to portray her as a defender of a Department of Justice tainted by political bias. Yet amidst the relentless onslaught, Jasmine remained resolute, unwavering in her commitment to truth. Then, in a singular, powerful moment, she flipped the script, revealing a leaked document that would turn the dynamics of the room upside down. This clash wasn't a mere political skirmish. It was a pivotal engagement in the ongoing battle for justice, dialogue about racial bias, and the dangerous weaponization of legal power. What was it that Jasmine disclosed? What revelations stifled the attacks and illuminated the ruse? As you journey through this account, prepare yourself for a story that demands your attention, one that echoes through hallways of history. That day, the summons was not an invitation but a stark command, an implicit alert that burned into Jasmine Crockett's inbox. You are required to appear before the House Judiciary Committee at 9 a.m. in room 2141 of the Rayburn House Office Building. It bore no signed courtesy and conveyed no extra information, merely presenting the name at the top of the agenda, Chairman Jim Jordan. The accompanying descriptor implied an unyielding vendetta disguised as legislative oversight, branding it an oversight hearing on the weaponization of the Department of Justice. For Jasmine, a civil rights attorney who had long battled with racist prosecutors and navigated courtrooms saturated with contempt, the message was unmistakable. This wasn't purely about oversight, it was a calculated attack aimed at dismantling her party, her president, her very foundation. By 8:15 a.m., room 2141 hummed with apprehensive energy. Staffers shuffled papers, reporters adjusted their batteries, and lobbyists pretended to be embroiled in conversation, all the while glancing towards the door. At the helm, beneath the insignia of the U.S. House of Representatives, Jim Jordan sat, sleeves rolled up, jaw tense, eyes as cold as steel. He was not merely presiding over a hearing, he was setting a trap. One by one, his Republican colleagues filed in behind him like vultures preparing to descend upon an unsuspecting prey. Some wore smirks of confidence, one even audibly suggested, "Let's see if she folds under pressure today." Jasmine Crockett entered the room clad in a sharp blazer, her hair styled meticulously into sleek braids. The sudden hush that followed her presence was palpable. She exuded an unspoken power that unsettled the coalition awaiting her. Beneath her calm demeanor burned a furious injustice. This entire spectacle wasn't about rendering justice. It was rooted in revenge. The anger Jordan harbored emanated from the fact that several allies of Trump were under investigation. The facts were chasing past the norms of party loyalty, which horrified him. Consequently, he twisted the gavel of his committee into a political weapon, zeroing in on Jasmine. Why? Because she embodied everything he feared. She was a black woman daring to pose legitimate questions, presenting a voice that could no longer be ignored. As silence enveloped room 2141 like an oppressive fog, Jim Jordan seized his opportunity. He gestured towards his aide, and in an instant, the lights dimmed, drawing the audience into an atmosphere that felt far more theatrical than procedural. The large screen behind him flickered to life, illuminating the chamber with a hue that seemed chiaroscuro, ominous yet inviting scrutiny. What appeared next was not raw, unedited footage. It was a meticulously crafted narrative designed to manipulate perception. Blurred clips of Hunter Biden entered into office buildings flashed before the committee, set alongside snippets of DOJ officials at press conferences, their quotes spliced and diced. Headlines, erupting in ominous red across the screen, proclaimed indictments like DOJ silent on Biden's dealings and asterisk questions mount over Hunter's legal shield asterisk, each clip more loaded than the last. A deep, exaggerated voiceover cloaked the claims in officialdom, whispering phrases like secret meetings, politically motivated immunity, selective justice. As the video culminated with the last warped image fading into inky blackness, only one line remained, glaring in luminescent white. DOJ shields president's son from consequences. In an almost choreographed act, Jordan rose as though he were preparing for war, his tone razor-sharp as he addressed Jasmine. Miss Crockett, can you admit to this committee that your administration is leveraging the Department of Justice to extract punishment from its political adversaries while erecting shields for its allies? Jordan's words landed heavily in the room like a thunderclap, not as a genuine inquiry, but as a carefully orchestrated indictment. Conservative reporters and aides leaned forward, gripping their devices, ready to coat the narrative that the day's hearing was poised to present. Before Jasmine could even muster a response, anticipation gathered in the air, with partial headlines already forming across social media. Jordan corners Crockett in DOJ corruption hearing seemed to echo in every corner of the room. While reporters whispered to one another, some remarked, "She's not prepared for this," while a keen-eyed Fox News producer, observing through a live feed, smirked, "We've got the clip we need." The pressure around Jasmine escalated, not from the perceived validity of the argument but due to the carefully arranged spectacle surrounding her. Unfazed, she remained still, her face a mask of serenity. Inside, a storm of thoughts raged, her resolve unyielding. Jasmine recognized the brewing struggle was not merely about the integrity of the DOJ, but ultimately about her right to exist within that space, her authority to speak truth in a tangled web that sought to suppress her. Here, in the harsh glare of political scrutiny, Jasmine understood that the constraints were not going to force her out. She owned that space and wielded it as her own. There, amidst flickering hues of projection and scrutinized silence, Jordan took the offensive. There was no hesitance in him, no reticence in strategy. But Jasmine's inner clarity surged even stronger. She possessed the facts, the law, and the righteous courage needed in the tempestuous face-off. Instead of sinking into the fray, impressively, she repositioned the discussion. "Chairman Jordan," she called, her gaze piercing, exuding the strength of her convictions, "could you remind the committee of your whereabouts when the son-in-law of a sitting Supreme Court justice accepted funding from political action committees aligned with Trump?" Her voice rang low but firm, each word landing in the chamber as delicately but as sharply as a well-aimed dart that struck its target. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted, the tension thickened, as the air grew heavier and quiet, no longer charged with hopeful energy. It transformed into something sobering. Jordan hesitated, unable to instantly counter her brave confrontation. She had voiced what many sensed but dared not convey. Almost instinctively, the group of Republican allies began shuffling, their confidence evaporating, replaced instead with the uncertainty derived from Jasmine's searing inquiry. Jordan's once unshakable air crumbled in that striking moment. "It's hypocritical," Jasmine added, persisting in her command of the discourse. "If we are to scrutinize the Department of Justice, we must examine the vested influences of our own deliberations." In response, for the first time, Jordan did not possess a ready articulation. Here sat a striking complexity. Although the hearing was designed as a skirmish against her, Jasmine was now implicating Jordan in a much larger plot. One where corruption transcended simple party lines and entered a dialogue that demanded accountability from all angles. In that heartbeat of a pause, it became clear. Jasmine was not merely combating Jim Jordan. She was straining against the very foundations from which such traps emerged, the structures of power defined by race, privilege, and unchallenged authority. However, the reaction surrounding her assertion ignited an uncertain flicker in Jordan's demeanor. His eventual response did not come as a sharp retort with newfound energy but rather as fragmented and desperate, his carefully constructed repertoire becoming suddenly disjointed. When he attempted to redirect the discussion, the audience noticed that he was floundering. The strength of Jasmine's testimony and her composure echoed even more resoundingly as she remained poised, deliberate, and anchored in truth. Her coolness struck in stark contrast to his growing frustration. "Mr. Chairman," Jordan finally resumed, regaining fleeting control over his narrative. "This is not about me, it's about oversight and accountability." He outstretched a distorted view of the committee's noble intentions, but Jasmine caught the drift with nimble grace. "Chairman Jordan," she interjected gently, "you must remember that oversight cannot veer into intimidation. The practice of calling forth witnesses and investigating must serve a legitimate legislative function and must not serve merely to damage ongoing inquiries." At that moment, Jasmine carried the depth of her knowledge and humanity before the chamber. She articulated her clarion call not as mere defense but as a need for fundamental re-evaluation of power dynamics. The room quivered under an unyielding silence as the members collectively absorbed the reflection of their disturbing realities, realizing that the lines between oversight and coercion had dangerously blurred. Jasmine then slowly retrieved a document marked with the inherent weight of the DOJ's structure, an internal memo. She presented it with composure, proclaiming its contents should be officially entered into the congressional record. Preparing the room for the impact of the words yet to come, her tone remained composed, yet purposeful, like a seasoned attorney lining up her arguments. "This memo was entrusted to my office," she declared. "It contains correspondence between several senior DOJ officials and members of Congress regarding the stalling of a federal investigation due to so-called political sensitivities. In fact, it specifically highlights communications that aim to delay justice for a defense contractor associated with significant financial contributions to political action committees linked with the previous presidential campaign." Gasps echoed at the back of the room. Tension surged as Jordan understood the implications of the document. His name within its lines, an unwitting participant in efforts to repress an investigation. Panic flickered in his eyes, but Jasmine was unwavering, maintaining her focus as she meticulously detailed the assortment of vested interests against the backdrop of truth she laid bare. This was no longer about Jordan versus Crockett. This had become about accountability at the highest levels of power. The atmosphere was palpable. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards, projecting headlines at mesmerizing speeds on screens outside the chamber. The air hummed with electricity as staffers whispered among themselves, creating an intricate network of urgency and disbelief as they processed the weight of what they heard. Jasmine's voice resonated through the room as she articulated in clear, straightforward language connections that bound together political influence and the imperative role of justice far beyond petty grievances. Room 2141, once a battleground of sharp accusations, had transformed into an arena of enlightenment where every word Jasmine spoke bore the gravity of realities confronting the nation. Faced with spiraling circumstances, Jordan, in a manic fit of overthrowing his authority, cried out against the unfolding truths. "This is nothing but fabrications," he exploded. "Complete hearsay meant solely for discrediting a litany of desperate protests." But Jasmine maintained her stance. She did not flinch. She allowed his actions to seem vacant, his defensiveness laid bare against the courtroom wall of her calm determination. What had transpired was not merely a theatrical endeavor but an epiphany that echoed throughout history. While requests to quiet the chaos echoed yet again from Jordan, the sheen of uncertainty around him dulled with an oppressive weight. Jasmine's steady clarity pierced through the tension thick in the air, a calm amidst the storm. As tensions began to rise, Jasmine leaned forward, illuminating the stark contrast of their positions. "I am not here to disown truth. I stand firm in its defense. The truth must be substantiated, rooted in accountability, demand action, and serve justice." Unraveling the tightly knotted threads of the room, Jasmine shifted gears. She raised her voice gently but positioned herself for impact, akin to a surgeon poised to deliver a precise incision where necessary. This committee stands not in opposition to each other, but to the injustices permeating our society. We owe it to our constituents to navigate these concerns rigorously. As soon as she uttered these words, the energy significantly altered. The environments of chatty aides and haughty media members transformed. It felt like they were drawn into the gravity of her principles and the implications at stake. Jasmine had taken ownership of the narrative, molding sentiment to lay bare the realities of a system designed to stifle voices like hers. Then came a pivotal moment, and while I present this evidence before you, the very framework of our legislative oversight, is it not the duty of this body to acknowledge the power of transparency and accountability? Would we not be derelict if we do not face the realities before us? At that, the silence broadened. It no longer rested solely on Jordan's back but enveloped the room collectively. Everyone watching understood. This wasn't merely cut and dry politics anymore. Jasmine had elevated the discussion to resonate with humanity itself, addressing conditions that refused to be confined to faceless grievances. Jordan, flustered and visibly shaken at the implications unraveling, finally sputtered and fell into mishmash complaints about procedure and integrity. He threw his hands in the air innocently, attempting to frame the discussion around decorous legal frameworks rather than addressing the tangible truths unfolding. But Jasmine understood how to exploit that wherein lay their hypocrisy, the truth allied not merely with performance but with action, reflection, and the ennobling pursuit of justice. Every ounce of energy shifted back toward her, and she gently commanded the room's attention again. When the session concluded, it remained reverberating in waves, the echo not just of applause, but a recognition of relevance that moved beyond mere political personas. In that hushed moment, the chamber was not recounting who had triumphed over whom but resonating with the compelling truths that had emerged in stark clarity. Even as reports buzzed imminent outside, Jasmine Crockett understood this was not just about winning a moment in the political contest outlined within the chamber walls. It was about creating pathways for future generations, perhaps for that single voice she had spoken to earlier today, someone watching from the sidelines, who had dared to believe that justice could arise where it lay dormant. As Jasmine left that hearing room, the lift of applause did not ring for her alone. It echoed for women, people of color, the unjustly marginalized groups, and those who had waited longingly for their stories to be told. In the days and weeks that followed, the ripples of that hearing swept across media channels, talk shows, social media, and classrooms. Jasmine's words, potent in their resonance, transcended mere headlines. They traveled through community discussions, educational debates, and formed the basis for consciousness. When faced with systemic injustice, overflowing leads of criticism could emerge spun against her. Yet Jasmine never sought the attention or validation. Instead, she engaged in serious conversation, commanding respect simply by anchoring her challenge firmly in the very structures of law and order she had experienced firsthand. As critiques veiled in technical language at times meandered beyond the surface, she understood how to dictate the tone, how to chart a course toward meeting demands for justice, and her integrity formed the foundation of both her arguments and the momentum it built beyond the walls of Congress. As Jasmine concluded her day, the meaningfulness of her position settled into the marrow of her being. What had begun as an ordinary day in front of the committee had transformed into redefining moments. Through her calm, steady voice standing amid chaos, she distinguished a shift not just relevant to policy discussions, but one that fundamentally shifted perceptions of truth, justice, and representation. And now, as the sun rose anew, shining its light upon the marble staircases of power, a siren call echoed in the hearts of those who dared dream beyond the rooms they inhabited. She had transformed an episode from chaos into an act of hope. Jasmine Crockett's story was but a chapter, with the call for collective rise resonating far beyond the confines of Capitol Room 2141. It became a beacon igniting the resolve for justice across the country, reshaping narratives with every step taken into the uncertain future. To speak the truths that, when unchecked, remain buried in silence to become whispers in history. With the walls of power shaken and truth laid bare, Jasmine stood not just as a congresswoman but as a harbinger of change, an advocate for echoes of voices seeking justice anew, purpose alive, and inexhaustible, championing the conviction that every individual's story mattered, and within the chambers built by the narratives of power, hers would remain etched in the annals of justice for generations to come.